Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the RF Video, not shooter review, but behind closed doors here with probably the greatest modern day psychologist of our era. We are here with Raven. And here,
Yay me!
And here with Behind Closed Doors, this isn't like a shooting review, but more behind the scenes with your character, how you developed it, how, you developed the whole Raven character, like who taught you, how did you go through the years, and how did you come into the character that you are today. So, going back to, I guess, ECW in '95, that's when you first started. How did you develop the Raven character?
Let's just assume people have never, the people may be watching this may not be wrestling aficionados. And so I actually started back in 1988. When I started in 88, I went to Larry Sharp's Monster Factory. And I wanted to be like a Michael Hayes kind of character, because I thought he was like the coolest, because he was this bad guy who the chicks loved, so he could be a prick and an asshole, but the women loved him, which was what was great. And I envisioned myself something in that mold, because I'd always been a smart ass and a bit of a dick, and but a good looking guy and who got a lot of gash. So so I figured out, and he was, and plus he was also a really good talker. I mean, and he on Watts' show, the UWF, which I thought was the greatest show of the prior to the modern era. I thought that was the greatest wrestling show there's ever been prior to the modern era, which is now.
Why is that?
Production, quality of storylines, the characters they had very interesting characters. They also used them to their strengths, as opposed to, just crapping them out there. They also had really clever and creative storylines, and a variety of them. They had a wealth of talent.
I remember we were in ECW, like we had the video table, you would take our TV, and I remember one time you were showing the younger guys, and I was just privy to watching it. You took a Mario Savoldi or Joe Savoldi match and a Buddy Roberts match, and you dissected this 3-minute match for like 4 hours.
Well, why don't you come over? Hold on, come over on this side of the camera. If we're gonna have a discussion, then let's have a discussion and back the camera up, and then because otherwise, it looks ridiculous me listening. So you might as well be on the camera.
We need somebody to do the camera, so.
Well, Feinstein can sit behind the camera. Feinstein.
Well,
that's all right.
Me and him are going to have a conversation anyway.
We can do
that
that.
needs to be in front of the camera.
Do you want to be on front of the camera?
No,
yes.
I'm fine. Go.
You might not want to be on front of the camera.
I'm not a camera guy. I'm not a...
Yeah, you really, you're not even a radio guy.
No.
No. Well, I'm just saying, because, well, go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, no, I mean, like, what made that TV? Was it the TV show that made UWF? Is that what you...
Yeah, well, it was a combination. It was, first of all, it was cutting-edge TV. The building they used was an awesome building for wrestling. The Tulsa something. The Tulsa Center. I don't know. And the lighting and all the stuff was very modern. Everything Watts got, very high-end, very modern stuff. It wasn't shot in a studio like most wrestling was done back then, in front of 50 people in a studio. But the characters, they had a wealth of talent. They had, of the good guys, there was, of the baby faces, there was Hacksaw Jim Duggan, there was DiBiase, Dr. Death Steve Williams, Terry Taylor, who else? Then on the heels, it was Devastation Incorporated with Skandar Akbar, and Bad Leroy Brown, Wild Bill Irwin, somebody else. Then there was the Freebirds, which were Buddy Roberts, Terry Gordy, Michael Hayes. They were another bad guy faction. Then there was another bad guy faction of Sting and Steiner, which was Rick Steiner, Eddie Gilbert, Sting, and Missy Hyatt. Then there was also the Fantastics as baby faces, and there was also Dark Journey and the Missing Link as baby faces. So you had, and all these people went on to having monster careers, like, not that they were all huge stars at that point, but as the big two, as the business broke down and finally became the big two, they all had very prominent careers, although not as long. The longevity at that point, though, because they'd already been in the business so long, wasn't as long as some, so their entrance into the modern era is only slight, but it doesn't make them any less of the stars that they were because they'd been headlining everywhere else. So, like DiBiase and Duggan and them, they ended up staying on top, in New York for all through the beginning of the modern era in the 80s and early 90s. And some of them, like Duggan, even stuck around, until the early 2000s. And like the Fantastics, they through probably up through early 90s were with Crockett. I mean, so all these guys were big stars. I mean, even though people watching today may not have heard of them, I mean, they really were. And so it was the talent, the quality of the talent, the storytelling. I mean, I can tell you a bunch of stories, but I was going to tell you about my favorite close to a show, but I've told that on many other DVDs. But one of the angles I really enjoyed was there was another heel faction, Jack Victory and John Tatum, and I guess Missy Hyde was originally with John Tatum, and then she started falling for Eddie Gilbert, and then Eddie Gilbert stole her, and then so they had the whole catfight angle, which back then was something original, as opposed to done to death now after everybody's done it a million times. They did a lot of original stuff. I mean, it was, it wasn't played out. It wasn't. It was just very clever and very creative. And so, and Michael Hayes also did the color commentary with Jim Ross. That's where Jim Ross started. And I think Jim Ross is brilliant, but you can definitely say he's become jaded and cynical over the years, and who could blame him? But he wasn't jaded or cynical at all, and he was, I believe, the greatest commentator ever, and he certainly was back then. I mean, I'm sorry, he certainly is now, but back then I would venture to say he would have probably been as well. The only person I can even put in his league would be Gordon Soley, and then Lance Russell, and as good as Lance Russell is, he's a distant third. But Ross was, just youthful and exuberant at that point, and him and Michael Hayes did the color commentary. And so here Hayes was the leader of his own faction, color commentator, and I always fancied myself a talker, and that's who I kind of wanted to be. So I was Scotty the Body, and then eventually, from there, things went up, things went down, things went sideways, and I ended up creating the Raven character.
Did you find when you were watching the show, I guess this is like 86, was that like the first TV show, like you were watching, you were looking at wrestling different?
No, I never looked at it differently. That's the really weird thing is, back then people didn't watch, they didn't have the discerning eye like they have today. If if the commentator told you Lex Luger was good, you thought he was talented. If they said he should be the next champion, you thought he should be the next champion. Like, you didn't see through somebody's lack of athleticism like you do today. You didn't see through the poor skill set because there was such little wrestling on TV at the time. There was probably, when I grew up, there was probably 2 hours a week, maybe 3, tops, and in most places there was an hour a week, an hour to 2 hours a week. But then now there's 5, 6, 7 hours sometimes, and also is when you become exposed to so much more, like back then, all matches on TV were just pretty much squash matches. They were like a star versus a no-name guy. The star would win. And then if you wanted to see a star fight another star, you had to go pay to see it at the arena. You weren't going to get it for free. So the skill level, because obviously the guys that were getting destroyed and losing every week weren't that great, most of them, which is why they were getting destroyed every week, wasn't that good. So there was only so much you could do. And so the fans didn't become as discerning. But once you start having main event matches on with Nitro and Raw, and every episode has, and then eventually, before it got to that point, there was, maybe all matches were all stars versus stars, and all of a sudden the audience started being able to see, whoa, this doesn't look as good as that, and you start to become a little more, cognizant of what is better and what is worse, although still the audience, what the audience considers talent and what the wrestling critics consider talent and what the wrestling booker considers talent, maybe 3 entirely different things. and that's why it's very important if you're inside the business to understand that how the fans view it. It's not how the internet has a very vocal community, but they're a very vocal 5%. And if you play to a vocal 5%, then you're a knucklehead, you know. And their opinions generally are wrong.
When you went into Larry Sharp's and everything, what was your concept of maybe the first character that you thought you wanted to be when?
Well, they didn't want that back then. You know, I used to get heat for that because I wanted to be Scotty the Body, that Michael Hayes type character. Mm-hmm. And you weren't supposed to think of a character; you're supposed to learn how to work. You know, and I thought, well, it doesn't matter how good you know. I mean, I was intelligent enough to realize, looking at the game, you know, at the way the way the business operated, that you could be the greatest wrestler in the world, but if you didn't have a gimmick, you weren't going to be a star anyway. So what's the difference? And now it's ironic that all these young kids coming up have learned how to do a bunch of high flying. They haven't actually learned how to wrestle, but they've learned how to high fly and do a bunch of moves, but they haven't learned how to create a character. And so it's ironic that back then, you know, you were supposed to learn how to wrestle first and then create a character. And now guys are learning how to, what they think is working, and they're not creating a character, which is completely, ridiculous.
When you started at the school and started doing like the indie shows and everything, was there one veteran who sat down with you or like came up to you and tried to?
No, there weren't. We didn't have veterans. I mean, people didn't have wrestling schools back then. I mean, very few of them. Larry Sharp's Monster Factory, but remember, Larry Sharp was a jobber. He was a Buddy Rose. Buddy Rose was a big star in Portland, and had a pretty good run with Backlund in New York. And McMahon wanted another Buddy Rose type, and so he came up with Pretty Boy Larry Sharp, who was basically just a glorified jobber, and Larry knew it, and that's why basically he was like I think he was like a state champion wrestler in Jersey, who got into the business. I think his dad was a referee or I don't know something, and but he was basically a glorified jobber, and so he started a school to make some money, and then. From there, he was in Japan the whole time with Bam Bam Bigelow. So there was a guy, Charlie Fulton, who trained me, who was another New York jobber, who was actually quite a good hand, but he just never had any charisma. He was actually one of those guys who could work but had no charisma, so he never really got a push. But no, I mean, you know, basically, I got good because I picked people's brains, and I asked a lot of questions, and I tried to learn. You know.
In the beginning, who did you pick? Whose brains did you pick, and who?
Well, there was no one. I mean, other than Charlie's brain, because nobody else was there. They were all a bunch of idiots like me.
What was the first place that you went to where you actually picked somebody's brain and went, "Wow"?
Well, you know what? I mean, I can't. You know, I didn't know enough to pick anybody's brain in Memphis. I mean, I tried. Although the irony was after I got there, I was only there like 2.5, 3 months, but after a month. You know, like when I first got there, they put me over for about a week, and I realized I was too green, and then they had to start beating me. Except by the third or fourth week, I was better than the a couple of the veterans that they were being pushed. I mean, I really not that I was that great. It's just that some of the veterans were that bad. I mean, they were just wretched. You know, I mean, not the guys like Lawler and them, but I mean, some of the veterans who you've never heard of, but who they would use, you know, in and out, you know. They would come into the territory and then go back to a real job and then come back in or whatever. And I remember Mike Graham used to give me a lot of advice in Florida. I went there next, but it wasn't until I got to Portland that I was able to pick the grappler's brain. And, you know, because, I mean, he was not selling out, but he was on top working for Watson in whatever it was, 82. And I guess they were selling out, maybe they were selling out the Superdome, and he was like 21 years old working on top. So, I mean, obviously he had some talent, and especially as a mask guy, because, you know, let's face it, I mean, if you're going to put the belt on a 21-year-old mask guy, he's got to have some, you know, he's got to know what the hell he's doing.
When you first went to Memphis, that was obviously your first TV.
Hey, where's my steak sandwich? Is it here yet?
Not yet.
I'm starving. Hurry up. What about me? What about Raven?
How was the going to Memphis with the TV? Did they, just pretty much throw you out there, or did Lawler at that time, did he help you with anything, or?
No, they just threw you out there. I mean, that's the whole thing is, You know, in this business, it's so funny. Like today, everybody was like, "Why won't they give me a push? Why won't somebody give me a break? Why won't somebody pull me along?" Nobody ever gave you a break back then. What happened was you got over on your own, and if you got over, somebody said, "All right, well, we'll give you a little more." And if you got over a little more, they gave you a little more. It wasn't a matter of, okay, here, somebody push me, somebody come up with a character, somebody make me a gimmick, somebody make me a star. You know, you made yourself a star, and it really bothers me that now they have writers in the respect that, you know, back then, if you could write your own, you know, you had to not only be able to cut a promo, but you had to be able to write it before and cut it. Now, you don't have to be able to, half the skill level's gone because you don't have to be able to write it. You just have to be able to read somebody else's words, which I think is, you know, it makes it easier, frankly, for everybody, and it's a little more unfair to the guys who actually could do this stuff to themselves because they're not given as much, you know, you may not be given as much opportunity for whatever reason, you know.
What was the biggest thing you learned about psychology or your character, like in your first down in Memphis for the first time?
I have no idea.
Nothing. Why did you leave Memphis, or how long were you there for? About
like 2.5 months.
Yeah. Then you went down to Florida.
Yeah, because then they were starting up Florida again. It had closed down, and then Mike Graham and Steve Kern had. But you know, I'm sure I've covered this in other videotapes. So
right.
I mean, I can cover it again. I mean, but I don't want people watching this to say, "Wow, we already saw this shit."
Right, right. Well, what did you learn? What did you learn more though in Florida? That was Florida a step up from Memphis?
No, I mean they're just lateral. They're lateral steps.
Right. Okay, earlier you said Portland was where you really started when you picked a grappler. What did the grappler say to you that like was?
He didn't say anything. I had to pick his brain. I had to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I once again, I mean, I'll cover this again, but I have covered this in other DVDs. You know what I mean? I don't want to. I just don't want people to watch this going, man, we've seen all this before. You know, if people are going to spend money, I want to give them something new. So let's.
Well, how long before the actual Raven character started, like in ECW? How long did you have that in your mind? And what was the early conceptions of it? What made you think about it?
Well, I was a producer for WWF, and they brought me in as a manager and as a producer, and that's not what I wanted to be. I mean, you know, I was on a 6-figure salary, and I was also on an office contract, so I was like, you know, an employee. So I got benefits and health care and stuff, which the boys don't get, which is horseshit. And so, but part of me just never rubbed me right because I wasn't on the, I wasn't going to be on TV anymore, other than as a manager, and that just wasn't what I got into business for. And it was a matter of not having any other options and no leeway and being small, 220 pounds back then, which was very small. I mean, now, now I'm 260, 270, and, and by no means small, but even now 220 is not small. I mean, Rey Mysterio is what, 150, 160? But back then that was unheard of. So, I mean, even Sean Waltman, when he was the 1-2-3 Kid, was one of the first small guys to get a break, but Sean was 6'1", 6'2", and he was probably 190, and he was looked at as, as a dwarf, He was looked at as, people thought he was 150, but he was really like 190, 200, because he was like 6'1", 6'2". He wasn't nearly as small as you thought he was. Even the Hardy Boys. People think the Hardy Boys were like 180, and they're both like 6 foot, 6'1". Actually, I guess both like 6 foot, and about Matt's like 230. Matt's like 230, and Jeff's probably 6'1", 205. But but they're much bigger guys than you think they are.
How early on, before you actually came to ECW, did you actually have the Raven character like in your head? Like, did you actually have the Raven character like in your head? Like, did you ever pitch it for WWE or?
Well, no. It came to me like so I knew I was leaving New York, and I definitely wanted to leave New York because it wasn't working for me, and Cornette Smoky Mountain was open, so I wanted to come up with a character, go there, get it over, and then go back to New York. But I knew if I stayed, then they would never see me as anything but what they did. And so I started percolating it in my brain, and pretty much put it together then. So anyway, I was going to go to Smoky Mountain because Cornette was going to bring me in, and it's funny. I was just talking to him the other day, and I said I was so grateful that he never did, because he kept trying to push it back because their financial situation, pushing it back a month, and then finally I saw the ECW show and I got on there, and at that time I thought it was brilliant, and but the whole thing was what I knew had to be done was that I needed something to wipe away the albatross of Johnny Polo. Johnny Polo was such a... See, I enjoyed being a chicken shit heel, but there was no market for it. Nobody was hiring him. And even though you can draw money with it, nobody wanted to do it. So it doesn't matter how good you are at something. If there's no market for it, you're fucked. And so I figured I needed to do something that was so completely opposite, so something that would bury that memory in people's minds. And DDP had given me the thought, I should go alternative because that's kind of who I am anyway. And I just started putting it together. I mean, and I just started, things came into place, and it just kind of all came to me in a blur. Like, within 5 minutes, the look, the whole attitude, and then it was a matter of refining it. But what people don't seem to get is as people said, it was grunge or this or that, and that's such a that infuriated me, because that's saying that all it is a cookie cutter, 2-dimensional, like later on they gave Bill Irwin a hockey gimmick, the Goon. It's just preposterous. You know what I mean? And he came out in wrestling hockey skates. Because it wasn't. It was. I wanted to be a 3-dimensional character, and this was a tortured soul, whose past, all our lives, everybody's life is influenced by what they went through as a child. In fact, they've done studies now, and if you know enough about people from 0 to 5, you can predict the people they're going to marry. In fact, if you know enough about any person, you can profile them to the fact that you can tell what they're going to have for dinner, what they're going to do next week, the following year. I mean, if you have enough information about a person, you can tell, you can lay out the rest of their life for them and be guaranteed that that's what they're going to do. Because for the most part, people never change. Some people do, but they're the exceptions that prove the rule. Everybody's capable of it, but very few people do because it's difficult. And when people talk about wrestling psychology, what they don't understand is they're talking about human psychology.
You said 3-dimensional.
Hold on, let me finish, kid. I'm busy here. When they're talking about psychology, it's human psychology, and if somebody's egotistical, it's because they're insecure. If somebody is whatever, then it's because of something else. There's a reason why it's behavioral science. It's not behavioral possibility. It is a science, and it's a well-known, proven fact. And behaviors are predictable, just like anything else. In fact, I'm actually reading an audiobook now. When I'm listening to an audiobook, not reading the book, I'm listening to the audiobook, because that way I don't have to read, because they're getting away from my reading comic books. And I'm listening to the audiobook, and it's talking about how, they've always said how, our DNA is our blueprint for who we are. And except this guy is going on to prove that not only is the DNA the imprint, but it's our belief system as well. It's the same way people are able to spontaneously heal their cancer, like Deepak Chopra talks about in quantum healing. If you can tap into your own particular belief system and alter it and make changes, that is entirely possible. In quantum physics, it says the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that the act of observation changes the actual proceedings, influences the outcome. We can influence our own outcome. Unfortunately, most people don't. And I know I'm getting off on a tangent here, but this is fascinating stuff, that we can actually influence. If you believed enough, you could actually walk through a wall, because of string theory. This has nothing to do with wrestling, but this is really fascinating. See, string theory, what it is The smallest particles are that we can be like when you can take an atom, you can chop an atom up in its gluons and gluons and quarks, is it? And then you can chop it, and you get down to the Planck length, and that's you can't chop it like anything can be chopped in half. But eventually you get to the Planck length and you can't chop any smaller. And what these are little strings, and they vibrate in different frequencies. And that's what makes the atoms up. Everything vibrates at a different frequency. And atoms are made up of like 99.9% empty space. We are made up of atoms, which means all human beings are made up of like 99% empty space. So are walls, so are rocks, so are anything. So if you can match your vibrational frequency with that of something else, you could feasibly walk through a wall. Now, sure, this has nothing to do with wrestling, but it's fucking fascinating. And it's entertaining me while I'm waiting for my goddamn food, you dumb son of a bitch. But I get off on a tangent, but people don't change. So human psychology. And that is what you're doing with wrestling. You have to understand human psychology because this is about pulling on people's heartstrings. You want to make people so incensed that they want to pay to either see somebody get killed or pay to see somebody be killed. They have to love you or hate you. If they just like you or dislike you, they're not going to pay any money to see you. And that is part of the reason when the business is down, because there are no stars that make you want to feel that way, that make you feel so emotionally connected to them. That's why certain actors can open almost any movie, and certain actors can't open any movie. Certain actors, you take a certain actor like a Brad Pitt, he could be in a rotten movie, you're still going to pay to see it. You take an actor who's nobody really cares about and put him in a great movie and it might not do as well. It's the confluence of the perfect storyteller, the perfect story being told with the talent that people love or they hate, and more so when there's both. And that's when you have buku business. Like when Austin and McMahon. Austin was the greatest babyface. Vince McMahon was an awesome heel, and they had a great storyline, and so it drew tons of money. But because the people loved Austin and they hated McMahon. If they just like you or dislike you, it doesn't draw money, and that's why you got to tap into that psychology. You have to tap into people's heartstrings. You have to make them hate you, and you have to make them love you. And what people don't get, wrestlers don't get, and they're so stupid, is it's so simple. To be a babyface, there's two things you need to do. Sell and have fire. That's it. Babyfaces never want to sell because, I got to look strong. Well, you know what? If you look that strong, you're not going to have any sympathy. No one's going to care. And if you don't have any sympathy, that means the heel didn't get any heat. And if the heel didn't get any heat, well, then why is anybody going to hate him? It doesn't make any sense. They have to hate the heel, and for them to hate him, he has to be beaten to crap or stymie the babyface, or he has to do some despicable stuff to the babyface so that the people truly hate him. If the babyface keeps getting right up and no selling it, well, they're not going to hate the heel. But if the heel keeps fucking a babyface and fucking a babyface, they're going to feel so much sympathy for the babyface that when he finally shows fire, they're going to go, oh my God, this is going to be a hell of a fucking brawl. And it's why in the old days, nobody ever fought anybody. See how it ties all the way back to the beginning? Nobody ever fought anybody but jobbers, because if you wanted to see two stars fight, you had to pay to see it at the arena. And now, because we give away so many matches on TV for free, because that's the way the business has changed and you can't really go back, you have to be even more creative in getting in storytelling, in psychology, in getting over your baby faces and heels, so that, because you don't have the luxury anymore of keeping them from your bad guy stars apart by them just facing jobbers. So the work now makes it twice as hard to do so, and but to me, I like that, because I like the challenge, because it just forces you to be more clever. Like, it's funny, the ECW arena has this great reputation now, but back in the day, nobody liked working there. I was one of the only guys who liked wrestling there. In fact, most of the boys hated it. I mean, now they talk about, I loved it. It was the greatest building. Oh my God, they used to dread going there, because it was a more intelligent fan base, more discerning, and they knew their wrestling and they knew what they wanted, and you had to be extra creative, extra clever, and work extra hard to make these people react, because they've been so jaded. and to get them to fall for stuff or to buy stuff. And to me, I love that because I want a tougher audience, because the harder the audience is, the harder I got to push myself, and I want to push myself. And it's also a challenge to me that, I don't believe there's an audience that I can't outthink, and out clever, and then an audience that I can't make, dance at my fingertips, which is ultimately the whole idea of psychology, is you pull the strings like a puppeteer. You give them something, you make them think they want something, then you give it to them, they think they're happy, and then you pull the rug out, and then they pay to see the rug be put back underneath. And then sometimes they want what they want, and you give them what they want, but then you pull the rug out again, and then they pay to see the rug put back. So it's just funny to me, like you see all these people that were in ECW, and I would say 75% hated working the arena. Yet they all talk about how they loved it.
Whose fault do you think ultimately it is?
Yours.
No.
It's Feinstein's.
That the young guys, they don't understand the art of psychology, selling baby
fake. It's their fault because they don't fucking listen. Some guys listen. Actually, some guys listen quite well. AJ listens very well. Daniels listens. Samoa Joe, and then they're the top guys of the new guys.
Do you think it'll ever come back?
What'll ever come back?
The whole more of the selling instead of the spots, and do you think it has to? Or?
Yeah, I think it already is starting to.
Right.
I think you can only watch so much flippity floppity floopity flu. You know what I mean? Before you're just like, I'll give you an example: the Kurt Angle Samoa Joe matches. Just the first one they did, because I didn't see the whole of the second one, but the first one was awesome. They took their time. They sold. Actually, both of them. I guess I did see most of it. And they made everything mean something, and they kept working a hold. And the people were with it. They were so with it and I don't see why people think, wow, we got to keep going. Well, no, if you're over as a character, the only reason there is to keep going nonstop is if you're not over, or if you're afraid that you're not going to be over. Because I think that's part of the reason why a lot of these young guys keep flying around and don't stop moving, because they're afraid once they stop and set. Now the people have to say, "Yay, we love you," "Boo, we hate you," or you know what, we don't care either way. And I think they're so afraid of that by keeping moving, they never have to settle long enough for anybody to make a decision. So the people are never given a chance to vote, so to speak.
Earlier you said about a three-dimensional psychology of a character. Actually, we've done a lot of behind closed doors, and actually that term has really never been used.
No, but it's probably because you said it incorrectly. I just built a three-dimensional character.
Could you explain that to the?
Yeah, well, a three-dimensional character is a real person. Just for argument's sake, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. He was this good old boy, who carried a wooden stick and basically is, but he was like an all-American athlete, good guy. Great guy, great character, very interesting, but there was no depth to him. You didn't know anything about the guy. You didn't know, you know a little bit about him, but you didn't know what made him tick. You know what I mean? You didn't understand, like, all right, Undertaker, you know that he's this guy that sits up every time you hit him, who's from Death Valley and whatever. Maybe he burned his brother, maybe he didn't. There's some minor fictitious history. But for the most part, he's just this super powered individual, you know what I mean? But there's no backstory, there's no true history, there's no true emotional content. It's like if you watch let me think. It's a good example. Here, pause it for a sec while I think of a good example.
All right.
You watch those, like, I'll give you an example of you have a more three-dimensional character. Obviously, when you read a book, they're gonna have a lot more time explaining. But, the first Lethal Weapon movie, you got this, the Mel Gibson character, or the Danny Glover, you really get this sense that that Mel Gibson, had been screwed over. He was special forces. He'd lost a lot. He was was his psychological problems. He was desperate, dangerously suicidal. You know, you understood what made this guy tick, and you understood in certain situations he was going to behave a certain way, just like Danny Glover was. Rocky Balboa, you knew in certain situations, you know, that he had this heart of a lion, but you know, in the first movie, but he spent it, you know, the way they paint the picture is he pissed it all away, kept pissing it away until finally, the luck of the draw, he gets one shot at redemption. But you understand who these people are. You know, a cookie cutter character is just, you know, you watched whatever that movie was with Rodman and Jean-Claude Van Damme, and you know the Rodman character was, I think, a Secret Service guy in black. I mean, you don't know very much about him. You have no idea what his character, not to sound like actory, but what his character's motivation was. You know, and let's face it, you know, we're a character. I mean, we're a larger than life character. You know, we're something that we're portraying this, you know, like if this was a movie, we're portraying it, and except the movie keeps going year in and year out, it's not just for 2 hours. And I didn't want to just be some, you know, some flimsy, yeah, like, it's good, Feinstein, take some more calls in the background. I better call for my sandwich, you bastard. And tell your mom I'm not coming over tonight. Anyway, I'll be here all week. Push your waitress, tip the bill. And Chris Daniels is a hump. And then if they ever have a Christopher Daniels Day, it'll be Hump Day. Would you shut up? I'm talking. I'm starving. So, what was I saying? Yes, I just didn't want to be this flimsy, cardboard, cutout, you know, version of a character. You know, I wanted to be, I wanted to create something that was going to be memorable. I wanted to create something that was going to have depth. I wanted to create something that people were never going to forget. If they ever saw the character, they were going to go, wow, this, you know, I wanted people to grow attached, you know, because that's how you make them love you or hate you. You know, that's how you make them spend money. It's how you make them care. If they don't care about you, I mean, you know, deeply, you know, one way or the other, you're not gonna be a star. You're not gonna be a moneymaker. You're not gonna be, you know, and plus, I wanted to leave my indelible ink on the business. You know, I wish I'd have done a lot more. I mean, I think I've done well. Although to be honest, up until 6 years ago, up until 6 months ago, I thought my career was pretty much a failure. Which would be kind of hard to explain to somebody being 18 years successful, but as a perfectionist, you know, I have ADD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, narcissistic disorder, histrionic disorder, borderline personality disorder. I have a wide variety of mental, I wouldn't say they're illnesses, but disorders, and which, because of them, I behave, not that I blame them, it's still my responsibility, but because of them, I behave in certain ways and certain thought patterns and certain whatever. And, you know, but, you know, a lot of therapy has helped me through this, but that because I was never the world champion of the #1 company, to me, I saw my whole career as a failure, which is, you know, pretty idiotic because anybody else, this is what's weirdest. To me, the reason I got in this business was I figured, even if I'm not successful, to me, to me, I'm still a success because I tried. It's the guy who doesn't try who's the failure. And I really believe that, except I hold myself to such a high standard because I'm a perfectionist that the standards I hold other people to, like, you know, like if somebody had a career and they did really, you know, fairly well and they worked all over and made some money, I would say you're pretty successful. But I hold myself, because of my perfectionism, to such a high standard that I can never compete with what I hold myself to. So I had so I built this foundation that I could never climb, you know, for up and coming wrestlers. I mean, to me, you know, as long as you get off your couch and try to do something, you're a success. Doesn't matter whether you're successful at it, you're a success because you tried. That's all that matters. And unfortunately, I couldn't take my own advice for years, and they say we teach what we need to learn. I mean, that's one of the first rules of psychology is we teach what we need to learn, and I never took my own advice. But eventually, after therapy, so after about years of therapy, I finally realized to the point that I've had a pretty damn good successful career, but still, it could have been more successful because I was really self-destructive in it. But I think, I know we're getting way bits and pieces off tangent, but what I guess what I'm trying to say is that I wanted to create a long-lasting impression. I wanted to be one of the greats, and and I mean, and to be honest, I never had the athletic skill to be one of the greats. I think I have the psychology for it, but I never had the athletic skill. But in this business, that's Feinstein with the food about freaking time. But athleticism is actually the least important component of this business. Being a star, drawing money, and being a psychology is what's much more important. But I think at this point, if I could have any kind of legacy, which I guess is where I'm heading, is I want somebody to come. I want people to get into the business. I want people to want to be in the business because I would like where they go. You know why I got in the business? Because of Raven. That would be the kind of legacy that I would want to have. Is that people got into it because of me, and then more importantly, they became huge stars because of me. But now that I've eaten my sandwich that Feinstein got, actually that was really good food too. If I can, what was that place?
I cooked it myself.
Go fuck yourself.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, but so what I think would be a pretty cool legacy is have I mean, let's face it, when the Road Warriors were over, a lot of people got into the business because of the Road Warriors. When Shawn Michaels got over, a lot of people wanted to be like him. I think, I wanted to be Michael Hayes, and then later on I wanted to be, I didn't want to be him, but I wanted to be my own entity, but that kind of, persona. And later, very Jake-like, Jake Roberts. I find it interesting also that that people that want to get into business also, like, how do I say this? Is, okay, they watch TV and they look like they're people, like a lot of the people who got into business today look like they're playing wrestler. They don't like the actual wrestlers. They look like they're playing wrestling, like, oh, I saw that on TV, I want to do that. And we all started that way. I mean, I started that way. I said, oh, I want to do this, but the difference is I tried to learn to make it make sense. Like, I used to go, you asked me something, I think it might have been off camera, though, about what I learned from the grappler, and like, I would say to the grappler, like, oh, I want to be in a cage match. I've never been in a cage match. And he was the booker in Portland. And I was there for 2 years. And I was like, oh, come on, grappler, Lenny, because his name was Lenny. That girl's name. Lynn Denton. I go, Lenny, come on, I want to be in a cage match. He's like, well, why would you be in a cage match? I go, I don't know, I just want to be in one. He's like, well, we can't just put you in one, you got to have a reason. He's like, figure out why you should be in a cage match. I'm like, all right. So I'm like, all right, well, why don't I be in a cage match? Well, the cage match is to keep everybody out. So, I mean, them can the thing. So, well, we need because of this. And then he's like, well, yeah, but how do we get there? Well, we just have one. Well, no, don't we got to build up to it. Why just throw a cage match for no freaking reason? Which, unfortunately, a lot of, like in New York now, they just throw shit out for no reason. It started happening really badly around the Monday Night Wars. People just started throwing shit out. Instead of building, they just went right for the fucking payoff. And what happens, though, is you don't get the same payoff because it hasn't built to it. And you also lessen the amount of payoffs. Instead of getting 10 payoffs with, 10 building, you get one payoff and then it drops right back to where it was. And it also irritates the fans. And so you hurt your audience in the long term that way as well. I mean, it's so detrimental. So I go, okay, well, if we do this and this first, then we can have a cage match. He goes, okay. He goes, but how are we going to get to the first thing you said? Okay, we do point A, get to point B, to point C, to point D, and then in the fifth week, we go point E, which is a cage match. He goes, okay, but what do you do the week after? I go, I don't know. He goes, well, go figure that out. And so then I have to go figure that out. Okay, what can we do? And then I come back and I go, okay, I got it. We do this, this, and this, and this. Have the cage, and we do this afterwards. He goes, but what about the week after that? I was like, son of a bitch. And then but that's how I started learning how to piece it together. And, it's not that he came out to help me. I had to pick his brain, but he wasn't going to withhold wisdom from me, but he wasn't just going to offer it because, I tend to offer it a lot. Kurt Angle does too. and people don't respect it. It really kind of pisses me off. Like, you know, I see Kurt getting all this flack for helping people, and I did the same thing, and I got tons of shit for it. You know, and it's like, I'm trying to pass on fucking knowledge. It's obvious I know what the fuck I'm talking about. You know, and these fucking jackoffs don't want to learn, you know, because they just don't want to fucking learn. Or they don't like people, like, you know, people always come to the back, how's my match? They don't really want to know. I mean, there's maybe 3 people in a business that actually really want to know what you think when they actually ask you. Benoit's one of them, Molly Holly's one of them. But there's not, I mean, I'm sure there's more, but there's not a lot. Most people, they ask them, how's my match? I'll say, well, I thought you worked hard, but this sucked and that sucked and this wasn't any good. And you could have done that better. It wasn't a bad match. No, fuck you. I'm like, well, then don't ask me. I mean, why? To me, I don't want to know what I did right because I already know that. I want to know what I did wrong and how I can fix it. Most guys are pretty much a bunch of cunts about that, you know? It's just kind of, you know, and unfortunately I got an abrasive personality, so I rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and now it's funny because I see Kurt getting the heat from the boys, and I'm like, fuck, just listen to the motherfucker, you know, he knows what he's talking about. I mean, his matches are fucking awesome, you know, I mean, they really are. I mean, some of the shit that they came up with, like, I remember, you know, I don't want to sound like the old broken record, I don't watch New York, but I really don't watch it very much. I watch it, I'll occasionally, if I'm at the gym, watch, you know, flip on a show. If I'm in my hotel room after TNA, you know, after TV, I'll catch the last 10 minutes of Raw. If there's a really good match that I hear about, I'll have somebody send me a tape. But for the most part, I mean, it's just, I never thought this would happen, but I just lost interest in watching wrestling. I watch our show because I'm on it, and because I work there and I feel that I should. But for the most part, I lost interest in watching wrestling because
it's not wrestling like when we grew up. It's just like a spot.
It's a spot fest, and the stories are spot fest. They don't build and tell a drama. They just jump right to the it's like, and instead of, you know, if there's, you know, it's like in a monster movie, you know, or whatever, and the girl's got to decide which tunnel, so she opens which door. She opens door A, and there's nothing, and then they open door B, and nothing, and then door C, and there's still nothing, but then turns around, there's the monster. And instead what they would do is, now they would just walk into the scene and all 3 doors are open and the monster's standing there, you know, and there's no payoff. You know what I mean? Alfred Hitchcock said, and here's the thing, before I go into that, people should study acting. They should study, I mean, that's what we are actors. I mean, you know, all the best actors, even when they're not talking, you can see something going on in their head. And that's what we should be doing. I learned, I took acting lessons way back in Portland. I learned a lot from it. But also, it's like blocking a scene. Like in acting, you know, blocking a scene is when somebody stands in a certain way and somebody else does. So that way the camera gets the right shot so that everybody's in a thing. And if somebody's going to walk on, like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this where I'm the interviewer. So Joe Blow comes in and stands to the side of me. Then the next guy comes over to be interviewed and walks right up next to him. Instead of the first guy, so then they go, yes, and then to the second guy he has to talk to. Whereas if the first guy would have walked past me, but not in front of me, because you don't want to walk in blind, and that's called blocking a scene. To me, it's so redundant. I mean, I'm not redundant. It's so ridiculously simple. I mean, how obvious is it that if you have 2 guys are talking, the first guy comes out, he needs to go to the far side because otherwise they're both going to be on one side. It's going to look really clumsy. It's going to look off-center. Aesthetically, it's going to look like crap. It's also going to be harder to do the interview. And if there's any kind of confrontation between the two, it's even harder. It's called blocking a scene. That's something that you learn in acting. Although a lot of it is pretty much it's just pretty obvious. But Alfred Hitchcock said, he goes, you show 2 people sitting in a bleachers watching a sporting event, man, it's interesting, it's boring, it's whatever. I mean, nothing special. But first, if you take a shot and we see somebody planting a bomb under these 2 chairs, now we cut to the show, now we cut back and we see the 2 people sitting down. Now they're having a conversation. Now we have suspense. We don't see suspense anymore. You see gore, you see horror. In movies, you rarely see suspense. And if you don't see it in movies, well then God forbid you're ever going to see it in any wrestling. But you need suspense. You know, sometimes the obvious choice is the best choice. Sometimes you want to build the belief one way and then actually give them the payoff. Sometimes you want to build it and go another way. But if you just give them the payoff, then there is no... You're giving them no reason to invest any emotion into it. And that's what sells tickets. It's an inter-emotional sport between us and the fans. It's the only sport where the fans' reaction affects the outcome, or so they believe, of what's transpiring in front of them. The wrestling. If they cheer, the good guy starts fighting back. If they boo, the bad guy gets mad. You know, you can't do that at a play. You know, you can't go see Othello and boo Lawrence Fishburne. Boo! You know, you can't. You know, and if you go to a football game and you start cheering or booing, the quarterback just goes, quiet down, quiet down. You know, it's the only place where you can, you know, it's like Rocky Horror. You know, and ECW was the true Rocky Horror Picture Show, because like in Rocky Horror, you bring all the props to the thing, like toast and rice, you know, and stuff. And you got to change the tape?
Yes.
Man, go fuck yourself. Another Bogart movie in a country where they turn back time. You go strolling through the crowd like Peter Lorre contemplating a crime. The Year of the Cat.
What's that from?
Al Stewart, The Year of the Cat. That was the metal version. In the morning of a Bogart movie in a country where they turn back time. You go strolling through the crowd like Peter Lorre contemplating a crime. The Year of the Cat. Remember that?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's the way I sing. I'm a lousy singer. I remember what I was talking about.
You were talking about Hitchcock.
About Hitchcock? Yeah, but what was I talking about though? What was the last? I was making a point. See how irritating is this going to be for someone watching it? There's no continuity.
You're talking about how the different spots, how like there's no disbelief, and the storylines are all like...
No, but I was actually in the middle of a point though when I got hacked, and so for people at home, this is
my fault.
This is what happens in wrestling that turns people off, is when you know they make up a story and they never tell you the finish, and then you're like, what the fuck? I invested all this emotion in it. So can you backtrack and figure this out?
2
All right,
seconds.
hold on, we'll figure this. I believe I was talking about as our the crack staff fucking staph infection, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I coined, not Paul E. for ECW, I coined it, because in Rocky Horror, like there's you know, like when they're gonna get married, everybody throws rice. People in the audience bring rice and throw it at the screen. When there's somebody goes, hey, it's a toast, and people put their drinks in the movies, everybody throws toast at the screen. And in ECW, everybody brought their own props. You know, one time I nearly got killed because some fan on Thanksgiving time handed Dreamer a turkey, and I stuck my head out through the second and third rope, and Dreamer threw the turkey at me, but it was frozen.
Oh,
it knocked me out cold for like a second, and but it didn't make it pop. It didn't make a noise. And to the people, they just thought I got hit with a lifeless bird, and so they just crapped on it. So I was out for like a second, came to, and boo. The people see, and that's the whole thing. You have to understand your audience, which is psychology too. You know, the audience cannot feel it; they can only see it and they can hear it. So if you don't sell, then to them it doesn't look like it hurts, and if it doesn't make a noise, then it's like if you hit a guy in the face. It makes a noise, you know what I mean? And so, if that's why people stomp on the ground. Like, I hate people that go, well, you wouldn't stomp on the ground in a fight. No, of course not. But the reason you're stomping is to hide the fact that there's no noise, because you're not really punching the guy as hard as you can. And if you're not punching the guy as hard as you can, then it sounds really weird silence. And also, it's a visual business, so the noise makes it more exciting. It's just like why you can hit a guy with a thin steel tray that doesn't hurt anybody, you know, when it gets a bigger pop than hitting a guy with a frozen turkey that knocked me out cold. Because it's the noise. People can hear it. That's why the super kick, where the guy slaps his leg, always gets a big pop, as opposed to one without the slap, because the slap's like, oh, crap. Because that's a sound you don't normally hear, and it sounds, oh, crap, he really hit him that time. You know, it's an illusion. In fact, I throw a lousy super kick, and the only reason I started throwing it was because it's such a great spot, because you get such a great reaction. And so it's also the same like with selling. Like I always used to drive me nuts. Like big guys, you'd punch them and they wouldn't sell. They wouldn't snap their head. And I'm like, I don't care if a 4-year-old kid punch you in the face. Your head's still going to move. It may not hurt at all, but the head is still going to move a little bit. And if your head doesn't move, then it makes the punch look like crap. You know what I mean? And it makes everything look like shit. And to me, registering and selling is the most important thing. Back to Rocky Horror. So the Rocky Horror. So the fans bring the weapons. I mean, the fans bring all the props and stuff. And I don't even know what I'm talking about. Hold on. Inter-emotional sport. Yeah, but no other sport can you be a part of it. Where else can you be a part of the festivities? It's like Mardi Gras or something. It's like, baseball game, you sit in the audience, you keep your box score, and you got a glove in case, you're one in a bazillion chance of catching a ball happens. Actually, what do you do with an elephant with 3 balls? Walk him and pitch to the giraffe. Okay, where were we? What?
Do you think that's why the crowd heat in ECW was so incredible? Is because when they would brawl in the crowd, it was almost like fan participation. Like the fans thought they were a part of the show.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it got played to death and got played out. But and also what happens is, actually, okay, this brings me to another topic. Yeah, absolutely, that's absolutely true point. But what else brings me to another topic is it being played out. Things only get played out when they're done poorly. You could have hardcore matches, like I always read, whatever, hardcore matches is played out. No, it's not. It's played out because it's done poorly. Whenever one's done right, it gets the same reaction. Fighting in the crowd. I just misspoke myself. It's not played out. It's only played out because it's not done cleverly. If you're just going out there punch, 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 that's not clever. If you got some spots set up and some different unique things, it's really, really good. You know what I mean? It's rocking, but it's all about being clever. If you just have a match with guys fly around, it's not that special either. That's a shortcut. To be honest, that's the biggest shortcut there is now, is just nonstop flying. Nonstop high spots. It is total shortcut for people who don't know how to work, You show me one guy who does total high spots who's really over. Name one guy.
Okay.
There isn't one.
Okay.
There isn't one.
There isn't.
Name one.
Wait,
I can't.
One guy who does nothing but nonstop high flying spots, and is super over.
What about Ray?
Ray doesn't do it. Ray
No, he
works.
doesn't. He works.
He does. No, he works. All right.
Yeah, Ray also sells his ass off. So when he finally does fly around in the comeback, it means more.
I always
You dumb son of a bitch.
I always thought, realism is what...
That was my Austin impression. You dumb son of a bitch.
Pretty good.
Thank you very little.
I always thought, realism is what, is the
It's the
foundation
opposite of
the
fakeism.
Right, but my question is here, do you think now with UFC, when you watch a UFC show where you have a guy punching a guy in the face, it's like teeth come out, he's bleeding and everything.
That doesn't happen all the time, though.
But I mean...
Actually, I'm surprised.
Yeah, but
Actually, you know what I'm surprised about, though, before to cut you off, is I'm surprised more people aren't more beat up from UFC. Like, I'm surprised how much the human body can endure. Like, I'm always surprised when guys take... I'm a huge mark for it. I watch that and I watch Pride. And I'm actually amazed how much of a beating these guys can physically take before they're fucking out. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that being said, but they're selling the whole time. But I can't wait for the day when it's gonna influence. Like, okay, people always say that American wrestling is 6 years behind Japanese wrestling, and what I have an addendum to that. Mexican wrestling is 6 years behind U.S. wrestling. And if you watch it, it is. They're just hitting their boom period now down there, which is about 6 years after our boom period ended, right?
Right.
Yeah, and in 6 years, shoot fighting will be huge down there. So that is my addendum that nobody else thought of except for me, because I'm great. Yay, me. But to me, I look forward to the day, because in England, I mean, not England, in Japan, they were doing nonstop high spots, and then all of a sudden the Pride got over, and so they started doing more holds. And so I can't wait for it to get over in the States so people can actually have to learn how to work.
But do you think it hurts pro wrestling when you have casual fans when they watch the UFC show and they see a guy punching a guy in the face, knocking him out, actually bleeding? and all this, and then you see a bunch of guys on Raw who can't throw punches and everything. Don't you think that hurts the credibility of pro wrestling?
No, because wrestling is professional wrestling. People know the outcome's predetermined. In fact, I tell you what, I've been in the business 18 years, and I think what we do looks more realistic now than it ever has. Well, maybe not now, but probably within the last, between the Monday, I'd say, now I'm saying, but going back 6 years through now, I'd say it's the most believable it's ever looked. When I first got into business, it was so phony looking, it was ridiculous. And of course, I had to stick to the party line that, oh no, it's real. Oh, I was so embarrassed to tell people that. Like,
right.
I would hate being in public. People go, "Is wrestling fake?" I'm like, no, it's real. And they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah. And I was like, all right, you're right, it isn't. But then people go, oh, but I bet that one match was. And every wrestler has a story because this is what it is doesn't matter what anybody else does. All people look at is your match. When they watch everything, but I'm saying, but when they're talking to you, when they're every match is a different entity. When me and Dreamer did the chair shot heard around the world, he wanted to hit me. Him and Paulie wanted to hit me like 10 times a piece. Not 10 times a piece, but Paulie wanted Dreamer to hit me 10 times, and Dreamer agreed. And I was like, no. I go. Can you imagine now? It wouldn't be known as the chair shot heard around the world. It wouldn't even be anything because it would have had no resonance. But I knew that if I get hit with one chair shot and I sell the crap out of it, it's going to mean something, especially because the way we told the story, because we took our time and we built it, and it stayed in the opening for a couple of years. And Dreamer, I give him all the credit in the world because, hold on.
Oh!
Is that a shoot?
Yeah.
Anyway, you have to wait till I'm done before you ask. Because you're blocking my. I usually can get it longer and more musical. Anyway, but I'll give Dreamer all the credit in the world that he's fat. No, that actually in this Trish Stratus story is completely untrue, which I'm gonna have to dismiss right now. But that's a whole other thing. Oh, okay. Well, basically, he said that I kept Trish Stratus from getting into ECW, which is completely untrue. I was the one who found her. I was the one who wanted to bring her in, and it was either her by not following up, or Paulie by not following up that kept her from being in the company. It had nothing to do with me because I was actually the one who found her. Just like I found Beulah, I found Kimono Wanalea, and I named her, which Dreamer tried to claim that too.
Where did you find Trish Stratus?
I don't know. I met her at Dragon Con, I think, in Atlanta. Yeah, but I think, but no, I had nothing against her coming in. Again, Dreamer said I cock blocked it or something, but that's ridiculous, Anyway, and Dreamer tried to eat my leg too because he's fat. Anyway, I love Dreamer, but he's still fat. Anyway, what was I saying about Dreamer before that? So anyway, but he listened to me though. I said, we're only doing it once. I go, 10 times is too much. He goes, but in the other matches, they're doing 3 shots, 4 shots. I go, it doesn't matter what they do in their matches. People don't go, wait a minute. Holy crap. He took 6 chair shots in that match. You only took 1. Yours is faker. How many matches, when you watch UFC, a guy gets 1 punch, goes down, another guy takes 16 punches. You don't go, oh, wait, he was faking it. Every match is different. Everybody sells different. Everybody's body's different. Every punch is different. Every way, there's so many permutations, it's endless. So nobody thinks, it blows me away that people in this business and the people watching it are so stupid that they don't see the forest for the trees. One chair shot is plenty. I'm losing my train of thought. But sometimes if you want 2 or 3, sometimes maybe that's more. You could do an angle where you hit a guy with a kendo stick once to the head and the guy, goes to the hospital. You could do it another time and the guy takes 5 of them. I don't care if it's been prostituted to death. You can still rehab it. You can rehab anything as long as it's over.
We're back.
I really wish you could see this. He's like, we're back. It's a major production. It's 1 camera. It's a Leica Dickomac or whatever that is, a dick in the mouth, and it says Leica dick in the mouth. It says Leica, Leica, Dicomar, like a dick in the mouth.
Oh, it really does.
Anyway, I know it does. Anyway, he's like, go. That was deemed excessively silly, and we've restarted the tape because we were getting way off the crack. The yeah, we need some damage control. A little inside joke there. Where are we at now? What are we doing?
I have a question here. You talked about brawling and everything like that. Who was the most unique brawl you had? You were talking about unique brawls and brawls that made sense. What was the most unique brawl you had, or who was the one person that you really shined with when you did like the
Well, I mean,
hardcore?
which kind? I mean, like I remember me and Rhino had a hardcore match at some pay-per-view that was I thought was just brilliant. I mean, we set up so much clever stuff. I mean, that was the one where Rhino and this is actually Rhino's spot. I always brought the shopping cart to the ring. And here, this is how you, I mean, in my opinion, this is how you do stuff to make yourself a star. I mean, okay, dual purpose. In hardcore matches, Vince McMahon always said, I don't want to have just objects laying around for no reason because it doesn't make any sense. Why would this have a garbage can right here? Why would there be a fire extinguisher in the middle of the third row so you can grab it? You know what I mean? So they have to be in certain places. Most of the buildings are pretty freaking big, and to get to the good props, like, you know, like the one time me and Bob Holly, where he slid me down a table into a coffee pot on the end, you know what I mean? Like the old bar scene, you know, in the movie, slid me down, you know, we had to fight all the way through the crowd to get to the people. And I thought, man, you know, you lose a lot of time just trying to get from point A to point B. And which is one of the reasons why when I go from point A to point B, I usually have one guy in charge, and he's doing all the work, and punch the guy, and the guy goes, sells and takes 5-6 steps, maybe one step forward, the other guy meets him, punch another 5-6. You know, you want to cover as much ground as fast as you can, because all you're trying to do is get from A to B. But I thought to myself, and then you can always put props under the ring, but then you got to throw them out and throw them, you know, and then it's just, I thought, you know what? If I bring a shopping cart, I can fill it with all the crap I need, because every match will be slightly different. Fill it with all the crap I need, plus it'll give a good visual, you know what I mean? Because my character's already pretty dirty looking. Now it's got a little homeless appeal to it. And then I thought, you know, I'll put some strange stuff in there just to give it a sense of absurdity, which is always interesting. So I put the Frankenstein doll in the ficus plant, which I didn't even know was a ficus. Somebody had to tell me it was a ficus. And the ficus tree. And I put it in the car and I come to the ring with my shopping cart. And so now I got all the props I need so I could get from point, you know, so now I didn't even have to go anywhere to do anything. And if I wanted to, though, I still could. But so Rhino came up with this, I wanted the cart in the ring because I wanted to do the drop toe hold on the, I usually do the drop toe hold on the chair. I want to do it onto the cart while it's laying on its side. And so I was like, so first I wanted to see if I could pick up the cart. Man, those things are freaking heavy and clumsy because the thing that goes, the thing that goes, you know, that's when you're pushing the part in front there,
Right.
that flips up, that thing's flopping around. Plus, it's really unwieldy and it's pretty damn heavy. So I'm trying to pick it up, and it's like, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm gonna be blowed up in a match. You know, I couldn't even get it up, you know, unblowed up. So I was like, I don't know about this. And Rhino's like, well, let me see. And Rhino, you know, Rhino picks it right as usual, sir. Yeah, he's got these legs like Tom Platz, and you know, I think he's like 5'1" with heels, so he looks like 6'2". And no, I'm just kidding. Now Rhino's like 6 foot, maybe he's probably we're probably the same height, 6 foot. Maybe he's got an inch on me, but he's just wide and thick as a house, and he's just got these legs that are just unbelievable. And he just picks it right up. So I was like, all right, this will be sweet. And then he came with the idea that he was going to spear me, go for his gore, and I sidestep him, and he goes into the back of the cart. And to me, that's the kind of stuff, that is so clever. You know what I mean? It's so original. It's so different than what anybody else has done. And so I set up a bunch of other cool stuff, but stuff like that I really enjoyed. You know, I've always hated watching, you know, it's like, or another thing. Another thing that about brawling is, that drives me nuts, is, you know, so there's stuff I love about it. I mean, and what I like about brawling, too, is to me, it gives me much more room to be clever. Like, okay, because in a wrestling match, you know, you use moves and stuff. But outside, there's so many different props and items and things you can use and creativity that, you know, I hate when people don't think things through. I hate when they're lazy. I hate when they take advantage of the situation. Like, it's kind of like, you know, when they just take super shortcuts, which is why people tend to say hardcore is dead, which it isn't. Like I'll give you, a thing that drove me nuts. There was a match with Abyss and Jeff Hardy and about 3-4 people or 5 people maybe, and I love Abyss. Abyss is one of my favorite people in the business, and he did this bump. I forget what it was, or maybe Hardy did this bump. I forget. They did something. Oop, we have a visitor. The lovely Dina, come in.
I'm sorry.
Come right in. No, get a shot of her boobies. The lovely Dina's boobies. Look at her. Woo! Okay, back on me. Back on me.
All right.
Anyway, so the and I love Abyss. What a talented worker. But I think that I forget whatever it was some giant bump. I think that Abyss and Falls Count Anywhere and Abyss and Jeff Hardy. I think it was the two of them. Take this big bump. Or maybe Jeff jumped off the top of the entranceway or something. And whatever, it was huge bump. And then there's some more stuff went on in the ring, and then Jeff and Abyss fought their way back to the ring, did some more stuff, and had to finish. And I thought, why? First of all, you want to build in a match, so you don't want to have your biggest bump and then do some lesser bumps and end with the lesser stuff. You want to end with the big stuff. Secondly, if it was that big a deal and they're that hurt, why have them come to the ring for the finish? Falls Count Anywhere, bring the finish to them. And to me, and I don't blame Abyss, I don't blame anybody. I think it was just one of those things that got overlooked because Abyss is a phenomenal talent. I mean, he really is. He's like a savant when it comes to wrestling. His body English, his movement is so. I mean, some people you have to teach them how to do that, and then some people just do it. And he's just one of those people who just knows the exact right amount of selling and shaking and moving. But it infuriated me because I'm like, wow, you just ruined this. It would have been like if I took 10 chair shots. It would have killed the whole thing. And I'm like, wow, you just wasted the biggest bump of the night. And now your match after that, you can't go any higher. So now you've dropped it down. Now you've no soul to move. Now you crawl back into the ring. Well, it's a waste. I mean, it's stuff like that, and in brawling that bothers me because I think people tend to forget that. That's one of my pet peeves. And getting from point A to point B is another pet peeve. I hate when they take forever because to me it's like if we did a thing, me and Runt, I think, and Abyss, I think, and we had to get we were on one ramp, yeah, I think that's what it was. So we were on the ramp, TNA on the babyface ramp, and I'm climbing up the ladder like I'm going to jump off and put Abyss through a table, and Spike jumps off the top of the entranceway with his feet and puts him through the table. The next big move from there, we figure that's one of the big moves. So we figure we got to get to the finish quick because that's that. So, but we wanted to get this other big move in next, where I get up on the where by the camera where the camera shoots. I get up there, which is about 15 feet up, and I put a chain around Spike Runt's neck, and I pull him up. I just muscle him up, not that he weighs much, and pull him up by the throat so he's choking and being dragged up, and then I push him off through a double stack table. And here's, in my opinion, why this really worked well. A couple reasons. First of all, setting things up always loses momentum. That's another big thing, momentum. That's one of the key things in psychology people never seem to master or even think about is momentum. But if I would have had to stop and build 2 tables, that would have taken forever. So I had the 2 tables set up. I had a tarp over it so that I could unveil it, okay, because I pre-planned it. And I wanted the people to know that's how smart I am. I knew I was going to do this. So it's covered with a tarp, so nobody's going to see it. But then I can unveil, like, look what I did. But the key thing here is, I think, but I had to get from the top of the ramp all the way to the other side of the ring, which is a long walk. And I don't want it to take forever because I think it's going to kill the momentum of the big bump that he just took. Right. And I still have to pull him up to the top of the thing, in front of the crowd and then to push him back off. So I thought, how can I get down there fast as I can be? Well, 2 ways. So as soon as he dove off the thing, I grabbed the ladder. When he took his bump, double stomped Abyss through the table, rolled off. As he fed around, I hit him with the ladder to the head. He took the bump, rolled all the way down to the bottom of the ramp. So now we just covered the entire ramp in one move, okay? So, and We also know we're going to replay the jump because it's pretty spectacular. So we know we got to replay. It's going to take 3 seconds. So boom. So I hit him with as soon as I hit him with the ladder, boom. We go to replay. 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. We come back. I had the chain around his neck. Now I could brawl with him and fight him over to where I need him to be. But why? He just went through. I just hit and laddered him. He rolled down a thing. I just grab him by the throat now and just drag him. You know what I mean? Like he's standing, and I walk him, and there's a post, and I bounce his head off the post, right. And then I bring him right to where I need him. So we've just covered 20 yards, 30 yards, in 5 seconds, as opposed to punch, him fighting back, us, instead of us taking all this way to get all the way down to there, when all of that is going to take away from the bump that Abyss just took, and the one that Runt's going to take next. So we killed all that by just going from point A to point B with one ladder bump, boom, all the way to the bottom of the ramp. By the time I get to the bottom of the ramp, he's staggering to his feet. I grab him. We may have even shot a second replay at that point, boom, to get us a little further along. So we used the replays to help us too. But basically, we just found a way to get from point A to point B to point C as rapidly as possible. Because otherwise, it's also like guys will have a match and then they need a table set up for the finish in a singles match. And it's on the floor underneath the ring, and the guy pulls out the table, and then he has to unset it, and then he has to put the legs on, he has to set it, he has to get into the ring, and you lose all your momentum. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And momentum's important because you're building. It's like you want to build your momentum, and then you want to slow it and build it and slow it and build it. You know what I mean? And you have to know when and how much and how little and how often and where. And that's a huge bit of psychology.
I remember when we talked earlier about when you showed the Buddy Roberts match when you're showing the thing. The one thing I always got out of it is that for somebody to stand in the ring and to do something, if you're standing there and not doing any motion or anything for more than 3 seconds, that's where your fault is. You have to do something.
Yeah, even when you're doing nothing, you should be doing something. That's
right.
Why back in the day, wrestlers would be doing this, and it's like, they're just getting some blood in their arms, but it's just, you're doing something because nobody just wants to look at a guy doing this. Unless, however, there's always the exception that proves the rule, and I always thought, I'll make this interesting. I'm going to sit in the corner. When I sit in the corner, I didn't do anything. All of a sudden, but I'm sitting in the corner, which is kind of strange, and I for some reason, I like being the exception that proves the rule, or maybe it appeals to my ego or something. But for the most part, you should need to be doing something, which is another reason why guys don't sell and why guys constantly do moves, because you hit a guy with a move, right? Boom. He's got to sell it. Now, while he's selling it, what are you going to do? You're like, oh, what do I do now? Crap. So you're like, well, if you're really uncomfortable just standing here, well, I'll hit him again. Well, now I hit him now. I still feel really uncomfortable. Okay, I'll shoot him off, give him a bump. Okay, good, I bumped him. Okay, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable again, and so you keep moving. So you have to find your own particular... Okay, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable again, and so you keep moving. So you have to find your own particular mannerisms, what it is that is going to allow you to take time between spots to allow... Because here's the thing, if I just keep beating on him, he has no time to sell it, which doesn't get over what I've done to him because he's not selling it because he's too busy being beat up by me. And if I constantly stay on him, the audience isn't going to have a chance to react. So I'll beat on him a little bit and then I'll stop. Like for my particular character, and I'll look around and I'll sneer and I'll pig snort, and I'll breathe hard and I'll look around at the audience, you know what I mean? And, to survey the situation. And, maybe, and that's part of the reason why selling's so good, because if I'm already selling something, then I'll start reselling it. You know what I mean? Like, man, this thing still hurts. Ugh. And then I'll go beat him up some more. As opposed to, like, I was watching a match the other day where one of the young heels who doesn't really know what he's doing that well, at least in a 3-minute match, must have at least 6 times in a 3-minute match, went to the crowd and did the old "I'm the best" thing. You know what I mean? And they booed him half-heartedly because they're supposed to. But, I mean, come on, you can, there's a time and a place for that to play to the crowd, and if you constantly do it, all you're going to do is burn yourself out with them, and especially if they're not reacting that hard. And so you need to find ways to preoccupy yourself so you can give the time guy to sell without you having to,
See, actually,
like an idiot.
One thing, though, actually, I thought not to disagree with you or anything, but I actually thought when you sitting in the corner doing nothing, that actually to me was doing something, because every time I saw that, I go, well, what's going through his mind?
That's why, yeah. So it's that is the exception. That's why it's the exception, but it really is, yeah.
And another thing with like TNA, and not to knock it, but it seems like with the young guys, it's like everybody seems to have that robotic ring entrance where they all come out, they all put their one arm up to the hard camera.
Well, a lot of them are they're self-conscious because they're. If you notice, they don't stop moving when they do it, because as long as they're like if they stop, set, plant, and make the whatever, hit the pose or whatever, and there's no reaction, it's humiliating.
Right.
So as long as you're doing it on the move, well, then the people, as long as you're moving and you do this, the people can't cheer as much for you or boo as much or do nothing as much because you haven't stopped and settled for them. So it takes away that whole, if you as you're walking, you're like, hey, yay, me. It's not. Then in your mind, it's like, well, I really didn't try that hard to get a reaction. So if you don't get a reaction, you don't feel that awkward. You know what I mean?
Right. Do you think it's a problem with some of the wrestlers now?
Well, actually, let me say this. Nope. In fact, I don't know whether it was Chris Jericho. I don't know whether he was fearless or just completely oblivious. But I love Jericho as a person. But I'm saying back in the day, we used to tease him because he would come out and he would, back when Nitro got hot, and he would lean against the rail and to the crowd, and the crowd at first would pat on him and hey, right. And then eventually they just booed the crap out of him. And eventually they were just completely indifferent, didn't care that and he's doing this. Yeah. And there was no reaction, and I thought, wow, he's either the bravest guy in the world, that he's gone out there and doing it even though they're crapping on him, or he's just oblivious. And I think it's probably a little of both.
Do you think it's a problem?
I like Jericho, though. He's a hell of a talent. So I don't mean to take away. I'm just saying.
Right.
But that was way back in the day. I just thought that was the. Honestly, I think what it was I think it was fearlessness, and I think it was also. I think it amused him in some way that, for some bizarre reason.
Do you think it's a problem now with the younger talent, where they try to almost outshine each other?
You see me keep looking at the watch here?
Yes.
What time is it?
I don't have a watch.
No, what time do we got on the timer?
32 minutes.
32 minutes left? All right, I'm going to have to call it a day, sir.
All right.
We will reconvene tomorrow. So if you're watching at home, there will be 32 minutes on this tape left, but it will not be shot at the same time. So I'll probably be wearing a different shirt. So don't be alarmed. Don't be scared. Now we're probably going to get 31 minutes. Now that was a whole minute, wasn't it?
Just about, yeah.
Yeah, pretty close. Now we're down to 26 minutes, right? No?
In 10 seconds.
No. Okay. All right. I'll be back
Tomorrow.
in 30. I'll be back
tomorrow.
To them I'll be back in about a second.
Yep. Bye.
And it's 1 second later for you at home, but for me it's another 24 hours. And my shoelace is broken on my new rock boot. So I am busy trying to fix my new my new rock boot shoelace. Because there's nothing worse than a broken shoelace. So now it's been 24 hours, and my memory being the shady thing that it is, we have discussed quite a bit of stuff, and I don't want to encapsulate anything, if that's even a word. If it isn't, I'm taking credit for it. But let's crack a window in here. Hold on, pause it for 1 second. And we're back. What was that from on Saturday Night Live with that skit with Jimmy Fallon? He goes, and we're back! He's the DJ from radio's the morning AM show, and he keeps that's his gimmick. And he goes, "Oh, it's so annoying, it's awesome." And then so it was a recurring character, and then eventually Ben Affleck came on and did like a completely ripped off character of him, like he'd stolen the guy's act. It was awesome. Anyway, and then the two of them couldn't stop laughing through the whole sketch, which was really funny. And actually, now see, some people are thinking, well, this is about wrestling. Why are we talking about other stuff? But let's just face it. I'm entertaining, and I like to talk about stuff that entertains me. And you pretty much know if you're buying a Raven DVD, you're going to get entertained by me. So you know what's interesting is for the longest time you weren't supposed to laugh, like break camera, because back in the old days, back when I was a kid, on the Carol Burnett show, Harvey Korman would invariably, like Tim Conway when Harvey Korman were on the Carol Burnett show, and Tim Conway was so funny he'd make Harvey Korman break character and start laughing, which is pretty funny when the host, when the guy who's on the show is laughing. And so when it's kind of interesting. So when Saturday Night Live first came out, their whole thing was, we're going to be different. We're not going to do anything that they did. So we're not going to break character. We're not going to laugh. And they never laughed. I mean, they did whatever they had to do to not laugh. And so for years, nobody ever broke character. And then when Saturday, so it's ironic that the first people to really start doing that again were Saturday Night Live, when they would start breaking character and laughing at their own sketches, or like the Debbie Downer sketch. And she would try and nail the and she would try and nail the face, and they would all start laughing, and she couldn't even hold the face. So funny stuff. Anyway, speaking of funny stuff, Joe Samoa. Samoa Joe. No, actually, I was going to talk about that earlier or yesterday, depending on whether you're me or you. I talked about the Joe Kurt Angle match, and what was so brilliant. One of the things that was so brilliant about it was actually, hold on, dude. These lights are so fucking hot. Do we need those?
Flip them up, bro.
Yeah, flip them up. I dare you. I dare you to quit melting me. What am I, the heat miser?
Fuck, that hurt.
And I need a snot rag too now.
Where's that?
Just grab a snot rag in
Better
from
not have
there.
anything
I gotta
else.
blow my nose. No, grab a clean one. Or a semi-dirty one. See this end, I'll use to blow my nose. And this end, I'll wipe the sweat. And then I'll throw it at Rob.
There you go.
Oh.
Oh, I forgot about the cum stain. Actually, I was gonna name my dog Stain, and then I could go, come Stain, come Stain. Actually, I wanted to name my ring character Nad. So then people would yell, go Nads, go Nads. See, because gonads are your balls. Hello, is anybody home? All right, folks, these are the jokes. What made that match so outstanding to me was, well, many things, but one of the things that really, really propelled it for me was when Kurt Angle would wrestle with Benoit. They would do all these counters and reverse counters and counters to the ankle lock and to the crossface Benoit crippler thingy. And they would do all these counters back and forth, and it just looked amazing. But in this case, they completely went the other way. And not that Joe couldn't have done it, because Joe's very athletic. But I mean, obviously, he's a different kind of athlete than Benoit. But they went a completely different way. Kurt get the ankle lock, and he's holding it, and he's holding it, and he's holding it. To the point where you're like, holy crap, he's got it on a long time, because the fans are so accustomed to people either countering it or tapping or doing something that nobody ever stays in it for a super long length of time. And this is, to me, where we're working. This is the art of working. I mean, anybody can do the moves. I mean, some are going to do them better than others, but pretty much there's a limited number of moves, and everybody can do them in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I can do a plunge, I can do a tope. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't even look good. But I can do one. I mean, so these are not things that anybody can't do. What the working is what you and how, which I talked about a bit yesterday or today, depending on or earlier, depending on whether you're you or me. And and actually, I could just be this could be the same day, just later. You know, I could be lying to you about 24 hours later because I just could have put a new shirt on, got a different backdrop. Well, it's probably the same backdrop, but no, I'm not lying, or am I? Wah, wah. Anyway, what's my impression of an iguana?
It's so strange.
Anyway, I like going for random. So he's holding it and holding it and holding it, and so to me it's like anybody can do the moves. It's what you're doing between the moves and how you're selling and how you're reacting and how the timing, the momentum, as we talked about, and Kurt held it on. And if you watch the tape, he held it for so long to the point where, whoa, this is weird, this is different, it's uncomfortable, what's going to happen? And finally, they did the simplest thing. Joe, if you can watch my foot, Joe kicked his, there. All right, back to me. All right, Joe kicked his foot out. He's laying on he's in the ankle lock. Joe rolls over to his back. Oh, and actually, let me back up a point. At some point, Joe rolled to his back because they were getting ready to set the spot, but Kurt felt it wasn't time for the spot yet, and he was right. It hadn't been enough time, so Kurt just rolled him right back over. So to the fan, which a lot of wrestlers don't realize, is the audience has no idea what you prepared. You could prepare 1,000 things, and if you only do 2 of them, they're not going to go, man, they screwed up, they didn't do this, this, and this, because they have no idea what you're going to do. And to be honest, if you're good enough, they should never even know when you screw up, because only you should know when you screw up, and it's not a screw up because, you know, what constitutes a screw up? Messing up the match? You know, I've seen people mess up, myself included, mess up spots so badly that the audience is like, huh? But then but if you don't put it over and you keep going, or you put it over, depending on the situation, and then keep going, I've had the audience come right back, I mean, instantly, to where they just go, you know what? In their minds, they go, we're going to pretend it didn't happen. Because the audience wants to suspend disbelief. You know, other than in Pittsburgh. Which is ironic that that's where Kurt's from. But when I was in the WWF, Pittsburgh was the worst town. The people just came and they sat on their hands and they made no noise. And I never understood, why would you go if you're not going to have a good time and cheer and make a lot of noise, you know, or boo or whatever. But for the most part, people come to suspend disbelief and enjoy the matches. So they don't want to see you make mistakes. It's not like auto racing where they want to see the car wreck. You know, they don't want to see a mistake. So they're more than willing to collectively go, we'll pretend that didn't happen. Like, for a great example, and I'm getting off on a tangent, but the 911 in ECW, and I'm sure I've mentioned this on a different video before, but 911 was so over. They'd play like, you know, for those of you unfamiliar with it, something would happen. Paulie would design something where somebody would just screw up completely in a match, where the guy just missed a drop kick by 10 feet and the guy would sell it. And all of a sudden you hear Edgar Winter's Frankenstein, which was a really cool song. And the people start chanting 911, 911. He'd come out and he looked like this badass motherfucker. And he'd come out, woof, when he choke slammed the guy. And it was fucking exciting. And then it's so over. It was so over that, you know, the people would sense something stupid, like some guy comes out like Santa Claus. Like in Philadelphia, Santa Claus is a heel. The minute Santa Claus comes walking out with a bag of toys, didn't even get it halfway up the ramp. 911, 911. You know, they had a guy come out one time, played it, and then of course then Santa got choke slammed, which was awesome. And of course in Philly, only that would get a pop. In Philadelphia, that Santa Claus got choke slammed. Excuse me. As I was saying before, I nearly choked to death. They set up a guy. They had a guy come play the national anthem, you know, on the guitar, and of course the guy goes, dun, 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 you know, and the people start, you know, the guy completely screws up the chords so obviously. 911, 911. So the guy was over like a son of a bitch, and the people loved it. But 911 decided that he wanted to wrestle. And he didn't want to just be on special teams, which is what I call the guys who do run-ins. You know, whenever you do run-ins or, you know, ring sachets, as Conan says, run-ins, car entrances, and ring sachets. You know, anything where you're not in an actual match, but you're doing something to thing. Those are, I coined the term special teams. So he didn't like being on special teams, so he wanted to wrestle. So he finally convinced Paulie to let him wrestle, and he went out there and stunk the joint out, and the people were just like, ooh. You know what I mean? Like, it killed the people, because here's their hero, 911, who they thought was a god, and he'd just been, you know, lowered down to mortal status. And it crushed him. And the next week, Paulie had him come out, and Paulie set something up, and he said, this time Paulie's really smart about this. Forget what it was, but he did something to make sure that 911 got a really impressive, you know, something really stupid from the really choke slam, like, you know, like the Santa Claus thing or something like that. And the people collectively popped like they did, and they just pretended it never happened, because they don't want something crappy to happen. They don't want a car to wreck. They want to see things be good. So you can make mistakes. It's when you put them over, or if somebody gets injured making a mistake and they don't sell the injury, that they're idiotic, because the people don't know it. I mean, they just want to enjoy the show, so they're willing to give you a lot of leeway. And so Joe rolls to his back. You know what I mean? And wasn't the right time, so he rolls him right back. I mean, no big deal. Didn't look out of place. I mean, and was that what sent me off on this tangent?
Yes.
Yeah. So this really wasn't a case of that, but just it made me think of a tangent that I thought was important. But so Joe rolls to his back like he's going to do something, and Kurt's like, it's not time yet, rolls him right back over and keeps the ankle lock. So he's got it on for quite a bit of time. Finally, at the last second, not the last second, but finally when the moment was right, and this is what momentum, and it's something you can only learn by working in front of a crowd, by listening to the crowd, by feeling the crowd, by understanding the crowd, because, you know, when a crowd cheers, you know, it's like, you can say hello to somebody, go, hello, And you can mean hello. You could say hello and you can be like, fuck you, hello. You know, you could be like, hello, like you're fucking depressed. It can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't have to mean the exact, connotation or denotation. So the same thing with a crowd. The crowd noise changes, just because to you, the fan, and to half the wrestlers, all they hear is crowd noise. I hear subtleties, I hear nuance, I hear difference, so does Kurt, so do a lot of people. And that's when you can hear the subtleties and nuance, that's when you know when to make the juxtaposition, when to make the change, when to make the switch, when to make the move, when to change momentum or pick momentum up, slow it down. There are a good number of guys that know that understand this, and there's a huge number that don't, and probably never will, and probably think I'm talking on my ass, but I'm not. But Kurt's one of them, and Kurt he understood intrinsically that it was not the moment yet, so he rolls Joe back over and milks it. Finally, when the moment couldn't have been milked anymore, where either Joe had a tap, or the place was going to go, they were going to settle back into their seat, because they're on the edge of their seats. You know what I mean? So it's like they're on the edge of their seats. Come on, Joe, come on. They want Joe to fight it, Joe. And they're on their edge of their seats. You take it too long, and they're going to settle back because nothing's happening.
Right.
Okay? Even if Joe's squirming and fighting, and Joe, I have to say, Joe did his best selling I've ever seen him do. I mean, he's improved leaps and bounds. I mean, the fact that, considering he was only working guys on his own level the first 2-3 years he's been in the business, it's amazing he's improved as much as he has, because it's very hard to improve working with guys on your own level, because he wasn't working with named guys, like Luger had flair and Sting had flair, and guys like that had, bigger, more talented guys to work with. Joe only worked with guys who've been working as long as him. I was really lucky. I had a lot of old timers like Al Madrill and Lynn Denton and guys like that. Anyway, so Kurt knew intrinsically there's a point, and the art is getting right to that point. Like, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, and if you hit the number 10, then they drop to 9, 8, 7. So you want to build it up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9.5, 10, 9, 8. And if you get where it's coming back down, you fucked up, because you lost the moment. And the really good guys are the ones who can take it to 9.5, 9 and 9/10, and then do what they need to do. Or sometimes they need to go at 7 because they know what's going to happen next is going to be 8 and 9, so that 10, is right where it needs to be. And that is an art form. That is where it needs to be. And that is an art form. That is the skill. That is the true art of this business. And so most guys usually bail out about 5. A lot of guys bail out about 3. It's the same thing in like a sleeper hold. Guy gets a sleeper hold, or a double down. 2 guys are down. Because in a double down, you got to factor in a lot of things. You know what I mean? First of all, the people generally aren't going to come till, a lot of times won't come till 6 or 7. So you're going to have to stay there and lay there. Guys, like, let's say we do a double knockout, and the people are so, in a lot of places, the people are so conditioned that people get right back up, that, wherever goes 1, nothing happens. 2, nothing happens. Because you never see anybody go all the way to 10 and get double counted out. And because you never see that, it's very hard to convince the fans it's going to happen. So it's like 1, 2, and the people are just kind of like, well, they're not going to go very far because it never usually does. And me and Matt Hardy sometimes, we'd wait for 6, 7, just laying there. Man, and I'll tell you that it's hard. It's hard to just lay there doing nothing, knowing that if you fucked up, if you didn't get the people, and they're not coming, and they don't come soon, you're going to have your thumb up your ass, and look like a jack-off, or at least you'll feel that way. And it shows a distinct lack of skill, because it means you weren't paying attention to the crowd, and you don't know what this crowd is capable of. And let me get some more water, Feinstein. Because every crowd is capable of something else. Every crowd is different. Here's the glass.
All right.
Every crowd is different. Every crowd is going to respond differently. And that's why every crowd, you have to listen to it as its own individual entity. And I can usually tell, and you should be able to tell, when you walk out, as the crowd, between walking out to the ring, the crowd settling down, the crowd starting out, the opening spot in the match. A lot of guys will listen to the other matches, but I don't know if I don't like to do that, because I don't like to go by other matches because I like to I like to sense them on my own terms. First of all, second of all, if you go listen to earlier matches, well, they're going to change as the night goes. They might get hotter, they might get less hot, they might stay the same. So it's a strange dichotomy, and it's a strange balance, I guess is more the word. And you have to listen for that, and so you have to know exactly when to make your move. You know, and so there'll be times me and Matt Hardy, we used to work around all the time in WWF on the house shows, and we'd lay there, and finally the people would just be dead for 5, 6. All of a sudden, people would just go 7. They'd start screaming 8, 9, and then I'd be coming to pick Matt up, and whoomp, bam, bam, he'd start fighting back. But it's really tough then because the if you wait till, you know, because first of all, it's that long, hard wait because you got to have the confidence. Now, if you've waited 3 or 4 and there's no reaction, and you just get up with no reaction, that's really flat, and the people know it. They don't know what they're seeing, but they know it's really flat, and it doesn't look cool. So and plus also with a double down per se, you know, from there you're going into the comeback 9 times out of 10. So you kind of want to build the crescendo of the comeback bumping at 10. So, you know, it's like 7, 8, at 9, maybe I go to scramble to get them, boom, bam, bam. You know, where 10 would have been is now me taking that first bump and feeding up for the next bump, boom, feeding up again. So it keeps building and building and building, you know. And in that case, you can actually take it past enough, you know. I use 10 for an example, but when they're counting to 10, sometimes it peaks at 15, sometimes it peaks at 11. But because the ref can only count to 10, you have to be up by 10. So even if this is a crowd that's not going to peak till 15, you have to get up by 10, and you have to feed and bump and build or stagger or do whatever to keep it going long enough so that as you're finally bumping for that comeback, that's when the crowd is peaking their noise. You know, so when I say the crowd peaks its noise at 10, you know, when I'm saying, make an example that it'll peak it at 10, that's just for, like, you know, a knob on a dial 10. Because a 10 count, you know, may only be 7 seconds out of the 10 I'm talking about. I know that's a little confusing. A little tired. I haven't eaten yet today, so my food will be coming in a second.
Here.
It's here, but let me see if I can finish this point, though. So, it's really important to listen to the crowd. Just leave it over there, Feinstein. It's really important. He was just getting his own food. Good for you, bastard. So it's really important to listen to the crowd, to understand the crowd. Every crowd's different. Every arena's different. Every audience is different. Whether it's 50 people or 50,000 people, they all respond differently. You know, of course, the more you have and the more exciting they are, the more energetic they are, makes it really easy for anybody. I mean, it's much harder to pace these things on a 200 people crowd than it is on a 50,000 people crowd. You have to, there was something else I wanted to say about this. Pause for 1 second. Another thing, I hate when you do that, Doug. I wish the audience could see how rotten that is. Another thing that a lot of guys do is, let's say they're going to do a spot. This is one of my favorite spots. It's so cheesy, but I love it. I'm a heel, and I got the guy in a chin lock, or like a Cobra clutch kind of thing, and I got his chin, and I'm squatting on his back like in this position here. You show it. You can see, like, you know, I'm squatting on the guy like this, but I'm kind of sitting on his back, pulling his head back, you know, like this is his head. I'm pulling his head back. And, you know, and then I'll milk the crowd a little bit, and finally I'll jump up in the air, and then I'll come squashing back down so my ass lands in the middle of his back and he flattens out. Boom, 1 time. Then I'll go to do it a 2nd time. Boom, and he flattens out. I go to do it a 3rd time, and he rolls to his back, sticks his knee up, and I squash my balls on his knee. It's a really easy spot, gets a lot of reaction. What a lot of guys do, because they don't understand why the spot, and they're just doing it because they've seen other people do it, is they'll grab the first chin lock and milk it. So people are really coming. And then they'll drop it on the back. Then they grab another one and milk it, and drop on the back. And then the 3rd time, they go to milk it, and now the people aren't coming as much because they milked it too much. They milked it in a reverse order. And we're back. I got a bad cough, so I just keep trying to keep you from seeing me hacking on my lungs. And you should always go milk it less. No, milk it some, milk it more, milk it the most. Because if you do it the other direction, if you milk it everyone to the pinnacle, if you milk everyone as much as you possibly can, first of all, you're draining the people. You're draining the people out of every last drop of energy they have. You're also crapping on anybody who follows after you, because you're going to exhaust the crowd for something that really isn't necessary, especially if you're in an earlier match. And you could say, well, hey, we should try to steal the show. Well, you should, but there's a way to steal the show and not crap on it for other people. I mean, you could, in first match, you could do a lot of things to milk the hell out of the crowd, but that's not the position of first match on the show. And especially the fact being that you're going to get a better reaction for the spot if, let's say, you grab the chin lock and maybe you crank it 1/1000 and squish them. The second time you get the chin lock, 1/1000, 2/1000, 3/1000, squish them. The third time, you grab them, and this time, let the people come. If you let them come every time, you're just going to burn them out, you're going to exhaust them. And it's just, I just think it's a cheap way to get a cheap reaction above and beyond what the spot deserves, just because let's face it, that crowd noise is a rush. You know, you've heard me say it, you've heard Nash say it, you've heard a million people say it. It's like a drug. And all it is it's a really cheap, easy fix. So back to the Joe's match. And then, what do we got left on this tape? About 10 minutes?
Yeah, about. Yeah.
All right, so I'll finish with the Joe story. So, and then I got to eat. So then you'll have to watch another tape. So back to the Joe match. I will drink my water. And see what I've done? I've just put suspense in this. Because you're like, crap, there's only 10 minutes left in this. So now you're like, crap, you know, I wonder if we're going to get to hear all we want to hear. Is he going to cover the points you want to know? You know, I actually could have made it more suspenseful by saying, well, I hope we have time for the rest of the Joe story. Because then you're like, well, crap, see, that's suspense. Because all of a sudden, now you know there's a set time limit to what's going to be left. And you want to get everything in. On the UWF show, they do it all the time. Jim Ross would say throughout the show, if we have time, we're going to show the main event. If we have time. All right, that's a really bad impression, but but hey, I can only do certain. Just, my God, it's all breaking down here in Tulsa. Somebody stop the damn match. That's still a bad impression. I usually can do it better. My throat hurts, so I'll blame it on that. That's still a bad impression. I usually can do it better. My throat hurts, so I'll blame it on that. Anyway, but he would say that. So throughout the show, you're like, man, we're gonna get to see this great main event if we got time. Crap, come on, get through the other stuff. Get through the other stuff. You know, and then. What he did, and so finally they get to the main event, and Jim Ross goes, "We're gonna stay with this as long as we got time. We're gonna stay right up to the last second." And you're like, "No, well, please get the whole match in." And they would show you enough complete matches, enough stuff, so you never felt like, hey, they're just jacking me off with no payoff. You know what I mean?
Like NWA did.
Yeah, it wasn't a cheap hand job. Well, I don't know how to remember it really, but it wasn't a cheap hand job. Like they would show you enough stuff. You'd see enough main events or enough pieces of main events. You'd get enough where you're like, where you didn't feel somebody was jerking you off but wasn't going to let you come. You know what I mean? You would get enough payoff that you didn't feel mad. They would leave you with enough payoff that you felt, hey, they did their part, but they would also leave you wanting more, so you had to pay at the arena to see them, which is the goal of the thing. Basically, wrestling on TV is an infomercial. They're selling. Basically, they're putting on a show, so the Little Rascals are putting on a show so that you'll go pay to see the actual real show at the arena. So, and what they would really do that I thought was brilliant, and nobody's done it since, is they had about a 30-second bed of music at the very end of the show. So, now you know Jim Ross is going, my God, we only got a little bit of time left. And he had so much passion in his voice that you're like, you know, that you believed him, that he wanted you believed that he wanted you to see everything that you could in this bit of time. Like, you know, you never thought that he was going to fuck you over and rip you off. You thought that he was on your side, because in wrestling, the commentator has to be a babyface of sorts, because he has to be on your side, the fans, and he has to be outraged by the villains, and he has to get across for you. He almost is like, he lets you know by what he's feeling that it's okay to feel what he's feeling. You know, and also that he's a brother in arms. He's got his arm around you. He's with you on this. That bad guy was a dick. Fuck him. You know, and he's with you on that. But what they would do is they'd have like a 30-second bit of music at the end of the show. So now, as if it wasn't enough that they would say, you know, we're going to run out of time. We only got so much time left. When you heard that 30-second, or however it went, you're like, holy crap, we're down to like 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever. And you're like, and you were just on the edge of your seat because you knew when the music cut off, they would go, whoomp, and it would say UWF, whatever, blah. You know what I mean? Whatever.
The
whatever.
tuxedo rental for the ring announcer.
No, but they didn't even throw. They got rid of all that crap because that by having all that stuff, the commercially stuff at the end, then they're kind of fucking you because they're not giving you the full time. They would just go. It was almost like a clapboard. It would just go, da, 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 and what would happen was the screen would go. It wouldn't go dark. I think. I'll probably remember this wrong, but half the screen, I think, or diagonally was red and half was blue, and it would just go, boom. And so it was like the up would go blue, the bottom would go red, and it would just go, boom, we're done. And that was it. You know, and maybe it would say UWF.
It said Mid-South Sports at the bottom.
That's what it said, yeah, that's what it said. And it was brilliant. It kept the suspense, and that's exciting. And back to Joe finally. So Joe's in the hold, he's in the hold, and Kurt's milking it. And the tension's building. And if he lets the tension go too long, he's going to lose the tension. Because he's going to go past the point where the people on the edge of the seats, and they're going, well, nothing's really going to happen. And they're going to sit back. Once they sit back, you lost them. You know, literally and figuratively speaking, once they sit back in their seats. I mean, you haven't lost them. It's not like you can't get them back. But you're not going to get the most out of them that you possibly could. And when you are at a certain level, you're playing to get every last. You want to get everything. You want to do everything perfectly. You know what I mean? You have to be a perfectionist at that level, and you want to get why. It's like why play if you're in a concerto? Why play every note right and then get the last note wrong? You know what I mean? You don't want to get any notes wrong. You want to nail every one with perfection. And so especially when you're having a match like they were having. So finally, except for some early blading troubles. But anyway, that's a whole other point. Which, whatever, that's another story. Anywho, so finally when the time is right, and remember now, Joe had tried to spin over to go to it, but Kurt said not ready, milking it, people on their edge of the seats. Come on, Joe, don't tap. And maybe if I don't remember how the crowd was, but either half were going don't tap, half were going tap. You know, I forget if they were back and forth. I forget the crowd, but all I know is they were all on the edge of their feet. Finally, Joe rolls to his back, kicks Kurt's leg out. Remember I started telling the story 20 minutes ago. Kicks Kurt's leg out, boom, puts him in the Joe clutch or whatever it's called, the Kata Hajamaji May or whatever. What's Joe's finish called?
What you just said.
No, that was Taz's.
Yeah.
It was the
whatever the actual
Samoan something driver.
Yeah, the Samoan remission machine.
Yeah,
the
Samoan transmission machine.
No, the Samoan transmission machine. Anyway, whatever it is, he puts him in a Samoan transmission machine.
At Amco.
And he's at Amco. Wham wham. And he's hooking it. He's got it on. And now you think it's it because remember, as I said before, he had Kurt and Benoit would go back and forth. They didn't go back and forth. He held it, and finally, when it would look like hope was out, boom, Joe hooked his hold on, and now you think that's it. Joe's got it, he's got it, and it looks like Kurt's going to tap it when it's finally right. Kurt pulls Joe's leg up, sprawls around, ankle lock again. A thing of beauty. I mean, they didn't go back and forth because you don't always have to. Less is more sometimes. And then he went back, and then finally they did something, did a spot, boom. Kurt caught him one more time and tapped him out, and it was fucking awesome. And it was one of those matches that made me, it made me remember why I got into this business and made me love wrestling all over again. And I'm not trying to down people to do 8,000 high spots because I wish I could do half the flying shit they do. I don't mean it as an insult. I love watching AJ Styles. AJ's phenomenal. He truly is. But Six-Pack, X-Pac, whatever, he does phenomenal flying shit. But they do them within context to make them mean stuff. But to me, Joe and Kurt didn't do a whole lot of stuff, and it was fucking awesome. And a lot of people bitched it only went, like the Sheets were like, wow, it only went 15 minutes or something. Who cares? Doesn't matter. I mean, I can see why The Office was hot at TNA because it didn't go long enough because they had to fill pay-per-view time. I get that from that perspective as a business person, but as a fan watching it, whether it's 15 or 20, sometimes when the match is right, the match is right, and the match was right at that moment, and it was a thing of beauty, and it's just everything was done at the right moment, at the right time, and that is the art of the business. It's not just let's get a bunch of stuff in. It's not let's do a bunch of moves. It's let's do the right moves at the right time, the right way. Let's build up the momentum. Let's pull it back, build it again, pull it back. It's like that analogy that I've given a million times. You jerk off and you're about to get your nut, so you stop jerking off because you don't want to, get the nut right away. And you jerk off some more, and you're just about to get a nut and you stop. And you jerk off a little more, just about to get a nut and you stop. And finally, when you blow your wad, it's twice as powerful, twice as hits the ceiling, bounces off, hits you in the eye. Doug's already selling it over there. Fucking Feinstein's trying to butt fuck him. It's craziness here. It's pandemonium. Hey. My God, it's breaking down and you down. My God. Anyway, but the point is that's what momentum is. If you just jerk off, blow your load, it's over and done with. You know what I mean? You want to milk it and build it, but however, you milk it too much, and then all of a sudden it just dribbles out the top, and it's like, oh, that was what a waste of it. And now you're like jerking furiously, and it's already half limp at that point. You're like, motherfucker,
What a waste.
What a waste. And you wasted all that, the 3 minutes you'll never get back. 30 minutes you'll never get back. What the hell? But the point being though is so there's an art form, there's a timing, it's about momentum, it's about a lot of different things. But to me, watch the first Kurt Joe match, watch the simplicity, the beauty of it, and it's a thing of beauty, and we're out of time. Clack.